It feels like we've been talking a ton about awards lately. Well, somehow the Blue Jays are award nominees.
You are Locked On Blue Jays, your daily Toronto Blue Jays podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jays. Thank you for making Locked On Blue Jays your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. As always, I'm Braden Iwasco. He's Carter First. You can find us on Twitter, Braden5Iwasco. I should say Twitter X. I got grief on that the other day. Then, calling it one or the other. Some people like Twitter, some people like X. Anyway, either one, Braden5Iwasco, Carter First too, or on Instagram or TikTok at Locked On Blue Jays as well. If you're new here on YouTube, make sure you drop a subscription. It really does help us out. Or if you're listening anywhere else, make sure you head over to the YouTube as well and subscribe to us there because, we have lives, we have shorts, we have videos. So make sure, you get all of that with the YouTube subscription as well. It is free, so you might as well. Lot to get into. MLB awards. We got Blue Jays hire a new hitting coach. And we have a question today that sort of relates back to yesterday's. We're going to talk all about that, get into all that. But Carter, it's the Thursday, sort of before the World Series gets kicked off. I know we'll go over a lot of that on Friday, but I guess let's just go here. Are you excited that the World Series is here? Are you sort of like, oh, this sucks. It's the end of the year.
I'll get into the matchup, obviously, more so Friday, but just the fact that we're at the end of baseball, it's an exciting World Series. Like when you look at the two teams, obviously, when you look at the rosters, probably the best two rosters that could have gone into it, especially with the big name players, things like that. But just kind of sad that's the end of baseball. The offseason, again, it's the shortest out of all the major sports, but it doesn't matter. It still feels like the longest offseason of all time. But where we're at, though, is just we're getting closer and closer to something meaningful Toronto Blue Jays to talk about. I feel like we haven't talked about anything meaningful in Toronto Blue Jays land for a very long time. We're still kind of waiting for the meaningful baseball to come back around at the end of March. So we're just getting closer and closer to that and farther away from this disappointing 2024 season. So overall, there's some positives, but overall, I would say overwhelmingly negative because we're done with baseball after, I'd say, a week and a half for quite a while.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it. I'm excited because it is World Series baseball and there's really nothing better. But yeah, it's going to sort of feel like there's not a lot going on. I guess you hope for some offseason moves soon as, the World Series sort of wraps up and we get information on, player signing, who the Blue Jays are going to be targeting. That's going to be fun. That is going to be awesome. I'm so pumped for that. But Carter, we got a lot to go over today, so we might as well just jump right into it. Chad Green nominated for American League Comeback Player of the Year. Before we get into like the stats and everything, just Chad Green as a player, Carter, this season. I mean, we've talked about him quite a bit and just how solid and steady he was for this Toronto Blue Jays team. One of the best bullpen pieces this team had, him, Henny Cabrera, just Yimi Garcia when he was in, just to name a few. So, I mean, I don't know. Chad Green being nominated as Comeback Player of the Year. Again, we'll get into some of the other nominees, but do you understand why that this is why he got nominated, or is it still is it strange to you that he was a nomination for this one?
No, I kind of like it. I think Chad Green is one of the most underrated Toronto Blue Jays on the team. And I think it's not really a question. When you look at bullpen arms, you look at the Toronto Blue Jays bullpen in totality. If someone were to ask me, hey, how was the Toronto Blue Jays bullpen in 2024? I would say pretty bad. I would say overwhelmingly, it was not very good. Chad Green was one of the only positives about that entire bullpen. And it's kind of the same thing, the role he was thrown into. When you look at all the injuries and just things that happened throughout the 2024 season, Tim Mesa falls off the face of the earth. Again, I'm not expecting him to throw out a 1.5 ERA and be the 8-inning setup guy like he was in 2023, but not expecting him to have a million ERA. Jordan Romano being hurt, Erik Swanson being hurt, Yimi Garcia being down at times throughout the season, obviously getting traded at the trade deadline. They needed Chad Green. They needed him so desperately, and they needed more than just Chad Green. But if they didn't have Chad Green and this bullpen was as bad as it was, imagine how it would have been without Chad Green. This guy still put up a 3 ERA with all things considered. A guy coming off of Tommy John in 2023, which we forget about as well. Pitched a little bit in the back half of the year, but really was a major piece in the Toronto Blue Jays bullpen, and is a piece that we're going to have to rely on again next season. So again, we'll go into the other nominations for this award, but just Chad Green being there, being a nominee for this award, I think was a good pick by the MLB. I think just shining light on a little bit of just a season that came with a lot of negatives. So with Chad Green, I think it was a fair pick, and I think it's nice to see one of our Toronto Blue Jays guys that wasn't really talked about a lot during the season get a little bit of the spotlight at the end of the year.
I think it's sad, right? That Chad Green really doesn't get the notification, the nod that he necessarily deserves. He doesn't get his flowers in the media because, as like you talked about, the bullpen in totality was terrible. But Chad Green stands out. There's a couple guys that stand out overall, but when the bullpen's that bad, you sort of get passed over. You sort of get looked over because they see what the total is instead of the guys in particular. I mean, Chad Green throughout most of his career is like a low 3 ERA guy. Last season was a bad season to say the least. I mean, he had a 5.25 ERA, uh, played in 12 games, pitched 12 innings.
Just coming off Tommy John.
Yeah, and just wasn't good, right? What do you expect from that guy? There's not much else to say. When a guy comes back after a major injury, only plays a limited amount of innings, and what do you expect? I mean, you can't. It's hard to get into any kind of routine when you're only pitching 12 innings a year, and having Tommy John surgery all in the same season. So when he comes back, he is I think this is the Chad Green we all expected, right? This is the Chad Green that when we acquired him, this is who we expected him to be, and he's been fantastic. And when you have a bullpen with Jordan Romano, Erik Swanson, all those guys working, hopefully a couple pieces you get in the offseason, but all those guys working together, I think that just leaves room for Chad Green to be even better this season, this next season. And we will get more into Chad Green's stats, predictions, and everything like that, sort of coming up through this offseason here. But Carter, overall, I mean, I think this is a fair choice. I mean, I want to hear who the other nominees are, just because I'm interested in finding out where he sits and could he possibly win this. And we will get into sort of the all MLB team as well after this. But Carter, let's sort of finish up here with Chad Green.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go over the nominations, and then we'll kind of get into some stats and who we think should win this award. So the nominations, the other two are Garrett Crochet from the Chicago White Sox. We talked about another team that had a lot of disappointments and not a lot of spotlights, not a lot of positives. That's one right there. And then Tyler O'Neill is the other one from the Boston Red Sox, a free agent, a guy that we might be talking about coming to the Toronto Blue Jays in this offseason. So looking at Chad Green and just kind of going back to these injuries on the Toronto Blue Jays bullpen, if it's not Chad Green as your closer, and I'll get into his closing stats after this, who is it? It's Henny Cabrera, I guess. Let's actually think this out for a little bit. If it's not Henny Cabrera, is it Trevor Richards at that point? And then you trade him. Like, who are you actually relying on down the stretch if you don't have Chad Green?
Well, so if you don't have Chad Green and maybe you take Henny Cabrera out of the equation, you have Trevor Richards up until the point when he gets traded, then I guess you go back. Then you go back to Erik Swanson, and it has to be Erik Swanson. But besides that, I mean, there's not really anybody else to look at, really. I mean, it's a revolving door at that point of whoever it is, whoever we trust the most in any given day, that's who we're going to pitch.
Yeah, and at that point, Erik Swanson's coming back from AAA. Are you that confident that you're going to throw him straight back into that closing role? You're probably relying on Ryan Burr. Maybe and that's not someone that you want to rely on as a closing pitcher. So if it's not Chad Green, yeah, you're in a lot of trouble. When we talk about Chad Green as a closer, he had 20 opportunities to get saves. He blew 3 of them. So 17 out of 20. That's 85% for a guy that's not even a closer. That's pretty good numbers right there for Chad Green. A guy sitting fastball at 95.5, a veteran in the league. Look through his slider a lot as well. And that's Chad Green's thing. He goes a mid 90s fastball and he works the slider and it's kind of fall off the table slider. It's what you're looking for. Going into some other Chad Green stats as well. Like I said, he went 17 for 20 in his save opportunities, just going over his season stats, 3.21 ERA, 53.1 innings pitched. Did have some injury concerns throughout the year as well. 46 strikeouts, a whip of 1.03. And like we said, throughout this week, we've been kind of talking about whip a lot more. If you have a whip around 1, that's something we're going to take. And Chad Green's is 1.03. That's very good for a closing pitcher. Yeah, Chad Green did everything that we could have asked for the Toronto Blue Jays. You look at that next season, $10.5 million for Chad Green. When you're looking at a guy in the market, if you're looking for someone like Chad Green, you're probably going to be paying that as market value anyway. So good job by the Toronto Blue Jays. I guess credit to Ross Atkins. I hate saying that, but credit to Ross Atkins for bringing this guy back. Now comparing him kind of to the other nominees. I'm going to throw it over to you because I kind of know where I'm at. Do you have Chad Green winning this award?
I mean, to be honest with you, it's probably going to be Garrett Crochet. I think that's pretty unanimous. I think Chad Green is the option number 2. I fully believe that. But Garrett Crochet, I mean, he was just something else this season. He was one of the only bright spots on that team, and so I don't know. You sort of gotta understand why he's getting it, and I don't think I'm really upset. I think Chad Green to get the nomination is huge, just as is, and I'm happy for him. But I mean, looking at what Garrett Crochet has done this season, 3.58 ERA, over 146 innings pitched, and I'm just trying to find. He averaged 12.9 strikeouts per 9, only 2 walks per 9, and 1.1 home runs per 9. I mean, he's just good, dude. He's fun to watch. It's just, yeah, I don't know. I think it's close, but I don't necessarily. I think it's a clear choice. I think Chad Green would be close second, but other than that, I mean, it's Garrett Crochet in my mind.
Yeah, it's Garrett Crochet for me as well. And I don't think Chad Green's a close second. I think it's Garrett Crochet, and it's not even close. I think you have a 1, and then you have a 2 and a 3, who, again, maybe there's your 2A and 2B. I think Chad Green and Tyler O'Neill is more of a toss-up. 31 home runs for O'Neill, a guy that just absolutely hammered right-handed pitching, did not do as good hammered left-handed pitching, did not do nearly as good against right-handed pitching. So again, it depends how you're going to value things. If you look at Chad Green and you look at a lot of these awards, sometimes it is based off team success. So if you look at the Chicago White Sox, you look at the Blue Jays, you look at the Red Sox, it's not a lot of team success there. So you're going to take that out of the equation a little bit here. And yeah, Garrett Crochet, like you said it, the strikeout rate is absolutely insane. What he's doing on that bad of a team, I don't think you can take that away from him. When you're looking at Chad Green, I think it's just kind of the same thing. Toronto Blue Jays fans were very reluctant, to give this guy his flowers. I feel like the rest of the MLB is going to be reluctant to give this guy his flowers as well. So I think for me, what is going to happen is going to be Crochet, O'Neill, and Chad Green. As for my own predictions and my own rankings for this, again, Crochet for me is the runaway. I have Chad Green slightly over Tyler O'Neill. Again, those 31 home runs are really going to speak out to a lot of people. But Chad Green definitely is deserving to be in this conversation. But I do think, just based off what we've seen from the season, what the media views the Toronto Blue Jays bullpen as, I don't see Chad Green even being close to being in the running for this award.
No, and I don't think it is. I think, again, he's going to get, I don't want to say snubbed, because Garrett Crochet is above and beyond the other 2 guys. I think Chad Green gets, in my head anyway, the second votes by a while. I don't think Tyler O'Neill gets even close to Chad Green, and that's saying, and I don't think Chad Green gets close to Garrett Crochet, but I think it's a big jump in between the 3 of them. And yeah, I mean, it's just tough not to vote for him. I mean, you see a bigger sample size with Garrett Crochet, way more innings. He's a starter. He's going to be rolling out. It's very different from a guy that's coming out of the pen every few days. So I think Garrett Crochet is by far an easy pick. And Carter, I know we want to get into the MLB, the all-team MLB as well. We will do that in a second segment. We'll take a quick break. We'll also hit you guys with sort of the news on the new hitting coach for the Toronto Blue Jays, and we'll finish up with the question of the day going to the third segment. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back with all of that. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. I talk about FanDuel all the time. My favorite way to bet on FanDuel is like when I'm in the game, when I'm watching it, and then I can see the trends of maybe what's going to happen, and that's when I throw a bet on. So like me, when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. I'm telling you, those bonus bets, so big. You can earn so much money off of them if you win. You don't got to go crazy. You don't got to make insane parlays. You just got to, bet on the teams you think you're going to win, bet on stats that you think is going to happen. Trust me, I might be on the biggest heater of my life in betting right now, knock on wood. So thanks, FanDuel, for that. Hopefully you guys can and find those picks, use those bonus bets, and get on a little streak yourself. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sports book. So Carter, there was a lot of information today to go over, and we try to get all the information out to you guys as fast as possible. I wanted to go over the all MLB team for 2024. These are team by team breakdown of the nominees. I want to start with the Toronto Blue Jays just because that's who we cover, and then we'll get into the rest of the AL East as well. The Toronto Blue Jays had 3 nominees in Jose Barrios, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and Dalton Varsho. Surprise, surprise, those are the 3 guys, Carter. I mean, do you think that there's anybody else that deserves to be in this, or do you think that one of those guys, maybe 2 of those guys, if at all, don't deserve to be on this in this nominee?
Vladdy, no question, obviously should be there, should be at minimum in the nominations. When we'll talk about obviously if he's going to win, if he's actually going to make the team, like that, things like that. Jose Barrios definitely deserves to be a nomination, I think, there as well. You look at the Jose Barrios here, we've been over a bunch of times. Very good at the start of the season, a little bit of a hiccup in the middle of the season, very good at the end of the season. When you look at the overall numbers, Jose Barrios definitely is comparable to a lot of those pitchers, so more than fine him being there. When I look at the outfield list, and I look at some of these guys here, like Mookie Betts, Jackson Chourio, Brenton Doyle, Jaron Duran, just going randomly through it. Teoscar's here, Aaron Judge, Jackson Merrill, Dalton Varsho. I'm a little bit iffy on him being here, to be honest. I know best outfielder in all of baseball. I get it. I'm here for it. When you look at the bat, like you do need some sort of bat to at least be in the nominee in the running for this outfield position. When you look at, again, like some of these other guys, like Tyler O'Neill's on this. I'm unfortunately taking Tyler O'Neill over Dalton Varsho just based off the home run, just based off the offensive production. I guess you could say it depends. It really depends on how you carry defensive play for this award. For me, it's more of a totality thing. So again, you have Dalton Varsho, you got the defense here. Is he going to win this award? Is he going to be as a part of this all-pro team? Absolutely not. There's no way Dalton Varsho's with this. But a little bit of surprise here for me. I guess I love it because obviously Blue Jays, you got to have your representation. But the defense is carrying Dalton Varsho to this award nomination. And for me, it's just the offensive numbers aren't quite there to match up with some of these other guys.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I'm at. I believe that Jose Barrios is going to be a part of this as well? Probably not, but I want to explain a little bit how this works. So there's a first team nomination and a first team list, and then there's also a second team all-time MLB list. So you will get to see which guys get voted on the first team, which guys get voted on the second team, and that'll all come. I think that'll all be announced, I believe. Let me just make a look here. Yeah, December 16th. So how it works is fans can go and you can place your votes. 50% of the vote will be coming from the fans, and 50% of the vote will come from a panel of experts. So, I mean, again, take that with what you will. I mean, the panel of experts having 50% of the vote can be skewed, but also having the fans vote can be skewed. So I think it ends up working out with the 50-50 split there. Carter, just going down this list, I think like just let's take a look just straight at the AL East. I mean, you got guys from the Orioles like Corbin Burns, Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, Anthony Santander. It just name those guys on those teams. Then you got the Red Sox, who actually have more than the Orioles, which I'm a little bit, I don't know how I feel about that. Rafael Devers, Jaron Duran, Tanner Houck, Kenley Jansen, Tyler O'Neill. The Yankees have Jazz Chisholm, Luis Gil, Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Austin Wells. I mean, I don't know, man. It's a big list, even just in the AL East, and that's not talking about the rest of the AL. So, yeah, Vladdy definitely deserves it. The other 2, I don't necessarily know that they'll get the votes.
Yeah, Barrios, I wouldn't be surprised if he got a couple. But again, you look at that list, there's a lot of unbelievable pitchers in the AL. It's interesting just to see like how these analysts and the fans just view players among the league as well. So yes, with again, you could have a guy like Dalton Varsho on the list. You can have a guy like Aaron Judge on the list. So it's very it's cool to see that. And again, like when you look at the Red Sox, like Tyler O'Neill, is he going to win that award for all MLB team in the outfield? No, absolutely not. He's not going to be there either. So some of these nominations are like, they are just throw-ins. Again, you need some guys, need some sort of list to have as nominations, whereas there's obviously the top 5 where you can see how they are more inclined to win the award compared to some of the other ones. So in terms of like numbers, just sheer like off each team, again, you want to have a ton of nominations here because that means you do have a lot of good players, and that means your players played well in the 2024 season. But for me, I'm not taking too much away from that kind of stuff, just based off of some of the picks that some of these analysts make. Obviously, the fans, there's some bias persuaded in that as well. So overall, you can take a lot away from this list, but is it end all be all for me? And who's the best position who's the best at their position in the MLB? Again, it's based off one season. How much can you take away from one season? That's going to be interesting to see as we go into our listener question.
Yeah, Carter, and you know what? We will report on it. Soon as we hear what the nominations are, you guys will see a video of what the results are, if any of the Toronto Blue Jays make the team. Carter, just before we get into, one of our viewer questions of the day, let's take a look at the Blue Jays' new hitting coach hire. And that's David Popkins from the Minnesota Twins as of last year. And this is from Blue Jays Nation. While the real test won't begin until players arrive in Dunedin, Florida for spring training next year, the Toronto Blue Jays appear to have found the right person for the job by hiring David Popkins as their newest hitting coach. Popkins, officially hired by the franchise on Monday, comes over from the Minnesota Twins following 3 seasons with their club, serving the same role. So I don't know, Carter. I mean, I know we've talked about the need for, to find a piece, to find the offense in this team, I guess is the right way to say it. And is this the fix? Personally, I think no. I think it's a good hire? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know this guy's catalog of work. I mean, yeah, I can look into the stats and talk and see what his players have said about him, and that's all well and good. But me and you have had the conversation: is how much does a hitting coach necessarily really do for each player individually? And I think that's where this comes down to, Carter. Do you feel like this is a great hire that might change the season for the Toronto Blue Jays? Me personally, not.
Like a new face in the dugout can't be a bad thing, right? It can't get worse. So, or maybe it can get worse. So I got to knock on wood for that. So that's the problem with this. Again, it goes into that same argument that we always have on this podcast: is how much do hitting coaches matter? Yes, they can make a game plan, they can have scouting reports, things like that. They see mechanical tweaks, but at the end of the day, you're getting to the major leagues for a reason. You're getting to the major leagues because of your swing. You don't want to completely overhaul your swing just based off getting a new hitting coach, unless things are going horrendously wrong. And you need to, if you need to overhaul your swing, obviously you're not probably going to be an effective MLB player during that season. So again, always goes back to how much do we put in as a hitting coach. But like you said, you can look into what some of the other players said about this hiring, again, just around the league, what he's done, and just some of the season stats that he's put out. So obviously this guy was a part of Minnesota Twins hitting coaches, as you said, last season. Overall, was not brought back. Again, if you're doing something pretty well, you're probably not going to get fired, and you're probably going to get brought back to your job. So you always have to take that into consideration as well. But again, sometimes it's just you need a new face. Sometimes things aren't working. It's not necessarily your system. It just doesn't match your players. But with the hitting coach, it always goes back. Does it really matter? But getting into his last 3 seasons, actually. So over the OPS, and obviously, as we talk about OPS, that's slugging and on base combined. It's a pretty good statistic just to show if a player is good at hitting and how successful they've been at hitting. So over in 2024, the Minnesota Twins had a 726 OPS, which was 11th in the major leagues, had 183 home runs, which was 14th in the major leagues. Back to 2023, they had a 754 OPS, which was 7th in the league. They also had 233 home runs, 3rd in the league. If you know anything about the Toronto Blue Jays this season, they did not hit a lot of home runs. 2022, a 718 OPS, which was 11th in the league, and 178 home runs. That's 13th in the league. So OPS and home runs based off the last 3 seasons. And again, how much has Popkins been actually putting into this, or is it just the Twins hitters actually hitting baseballs? But they have been an above average offense in the last 3 seasons, going back to 2023, a top 3 team in home runs. So that's obviously something that's very nice. And then OPS, you get 11th, 7th, and 11th in those respective years. So he has a history of being a productive hitting coach. But again, for me, it's is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. going to have another good year? Is Alejandro Kirk going to bounce back? Are some of the free agents that we hopefully bring in going to have good seasons? Are we going to get a better year from some of our prospects? Yes, Popkins can help with this, but if he can completely turn around careers, for me, I just don't see that happening. I don't see hitting coaches reviving like players, especially with swings. Pitching's a lot different than hitting for me. I think a pitching coach can make one little tweak, and just like that, you can have a good pitcher. For hitting, I think it's a lot more complicated.
Yeah, I agree. It's a lot harder of a fix to because if you change one little thing in somebody's swing, it can throw everything off. So you got to be very careful about what you change and when you change it. And if that's what the hitting coaches are doing, I think it's more so going to be on some of the younger guys where you're not going to look for a big swing changer or tweaking many things with Bo or Vlad. But in the sense of guys like Davis Schneider or Ernie Clement, we'll see what happens with him. Spencer Horwitz, eventually you're going to probably see a slump from him. He's going to want to try to figure it out. This might be a good solution for that, getting sort of a new guy, a new face, a new look. But in saying all that, Carter, I don't know if you have anything else on Popkins just before we head into the question of the day.
I got one more thing. It's just based off player experiences. So if you've been following the MLB, you should know who Carlos Correa is. Has a lot of accolades at the shortstop position, and did have some positive things to say about Popkins. So he says, I learned a lot about my swing, learned a lot about my approach, learned a lot about just the game in general. Popkins, the hitting coach, helped me understand myself a little better. A 900 OPS for some people comes with home runs and walks. For me, it comes with being a little more creative, and he helped me understand that I don't have to hit a home run every at-bat. Pop's been a huge help for me, and I'm grateful that I came to this organization, and he was my hitting coach. So again, how much do you take away from that? Again, a lot of this stuff, when it's positive for me, I always think back to just, is it media trained? How much is this is a media trained answer? Obviously, if you say positive things, like, you can use that spin zone every single time. So I have to kind of, get out of my own head a little bit here and actually look at the things that Carlos Correa was saying. And again, a lot of this is just, it's personal. He helped Carlos Correa. Is anyone else in the Twins going to say the same thing? When you look at, for example, Royce Lewis. He's not giving all of his praise and props to Popkins. So I don't want to take anything away from this guy, because obviously he's had an above average offense 3 straight seasons. Toronto Blue Jays have not had an above average offense for 3 straight seasons. So a new face can't be the worst thing, but I just keep going back to this point. And this is why I keep talking about it, is that for me, it is a good signing. Again, you could have the best pedigree of all time. It really goes in the hands of the players if you actually want to have a good offense rather than your hitting coach, in my opinion. Yeah,
I 100% agree. And I know we've had this conversation time and time again, and this just, something like this drops and this signing. And again, it brings us back to having the conversation. What do these coaches do? And I don't think we have that insight necessarily to really talk about, the day-to-days of a hitting or pitching coach. So, we'll have to wait and see. If it does make a difference, it does. And if it doesn't, well, there's sort of our answer. In saying that, Carter, we have our question of the day to get into, so we'll head over after this quick break and answer all that for you. The question sort of revolves around yesterday's and how, what makes a good player? What makes a not so good player? How many seasons? What are you taking out of it? We'll get into all that coming up. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. I always talk about Game Time. It's the only place I'll buy tickets. I will not use another app. It just makes everything so much easier. Game Time picks, curates the most easy option for sports, comedy, theater. It gives you the best option right there and then. It also has flash deals where you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. They have their zone deals. There's so many like little discounts that they throw in there. It's fantastic. They also have their all-in pricing, which shows you your total up front. You don't have to worry about, there'll be a surprise fee when I go to the checkout. A lot of these sites have them. Game Time is great because they don't. You know what you're paying right then and there. That's it. They also have the lowest price guaranteed. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. If not, take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets and more with the Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Thank you to Justin Powers for our question of the day. This sort of relates back to the one we had yesterday, Carter. And he says, question is in response to the Locked On Blue Jays question of the day. How many good or bad seasons does a player need to have for you to determine if they are a good or bad player? And I'll throw this to you first. I sort of had some time to mull this one over. Um, this is what I'll lead you into it with. Is it season by season or is it player by player? I think is the right question to ask here.
This is a good question because there's a lot of dynamics that go into it. I don't think you can just easily say that, oh, it's after 4 years, you can kind of tell what a player is. I think there's a lot to do with roster construction. There's a lot to do with who's on your team. There's a lot to do with who's your coaches. It's a lot to do with just, like, again, where your team's at. I'll start with this. If you're a bad player, you're probably not going to have 3, 4, 5 seasons where you're going to be able to be bad, just straight up bad for that long a time, because it's a cruel business. You're not going to, a lot of times you don't get the full chance to actually work on your stuff and pan out as a real baseball player. Teams are trying to get good and they're trying to get good quick. So you're not going to have all these years to kind of build up. And if you are, you're going to be in AAA or AA. They're going to send you down. In terms of being good, again, it's tough to put a complete number on this, because you look at, for a guy like Vladimir Guerrero Jr., he's going to be more productive on a team like the Los Angeles Dodgers because we would have Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman between them. When you look at where he is in the Toronto Blue Jays, you're really only scared of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. So that's where the kind of the roster construction goes into this. But if I had to put a number on it, for being a good baseball player, if you're good for 3 years in a row, there's probably a reason for it. Like, you can get unlucky for 1 year. I think Bo Bichette is an example. There's a little bit of luck that goes into this, injuries, things like that. Bo Bichette's still going to be a good baseball player at the end of the day. He's had the service time. So for me, I'd say 3 years of being a good baseball player is more so for me going to make me more lenient towards you if you have a bad year after that. For a bad baseball player, like I said, there's not really a time to play out being a bad baseball player. So I guess the same thing. You have that 3-year span where you can tell, like, hey, has this guy been giving opportunities? Has this guy been playing every single day? Again, a lot that goes into it. If he's playing a full-time player, regular time for 3 straight years, and you don't really see anything, I guess that's where I'd say, okay, probably time to move on. So for me, again, I don't necessarily think there's a baseline for this, or there's like a universal number where you say after 3 years, this guy's good. It is player by player, but as a baseline, I think for 3 years, that's where I would start it.
It's very player to player, and it's very team by team as well, right? Like, if you're a great player on a bad team, you're not going to be noticed as much in those seasons that maybe you're having an unreal year, might not be picked up like that. Or if you're having a really bad year on a really bad team, well, you might still be on that team because they might not have any other options to go to. So it's very, very case by case basis. But at the end of the day, you look at a guy like you said, Bo Bichette, 1 down year. Other than that, we've seen what Bo Bichette can do and what Bo Bichette is. So are you going to throw away 3 seasons of really good baseball because of 1 bad season of baseball? No. And that's just dumb to think about. In the other hand, how much merit do you put in a guy that's, say, 30 years old, and if he hasn't exploded by now, will he? Probably not. And it's all timelines, it's all trends, right? You got some guys that have really good careers up until they're 31, and then you start to see that little bit of the downhill trend. And at that point, you got to realize, okay, he's, maybe after 2 seasons of this downhill trend and the stats slowly starting to dip, 3 years of the downhill trend. Okay, well, there you go. They're probably not going to be as good as they were. Yes, they might have 1 random season that he, has his numbers back up, but for the most part, it's looking at the trend. There might be, you're always going to look for that sort of downward trend and then the spike, or the upward trend and then the back spike down. That'll happen. It's just when they start stringing those years together, either in the good or the bad, that's when the change needs to happen in the mind of people that are watching the teams, GMs, managers, everything like that, is understanding when those guys are on the upwards or going to have that dip year. And that's tough to know. And it really is impossible because it is baseball. Baseball is very random and very unlucky. So it's a tough question to answer in the sense that there is no base timeline, like you said, Carter. There is no this many years, but it's all looking at trends. Baseball, I'm not an super analytic guy, but in the same sense, there's the eye test, there's the stats. When you see something for multiple years, it becomes a trend. And when a trend starts to happen, that's when you can take a lot away from it. So it's a good question. It's honestly a good thought, thought provoking. So I really like the question. And thanks, Justin. If you guys have any questions, make sure you leave them down in the comments. so we can do more question of the day segments, because it really gets us thinking, gets our brains churning on some baseball knowledge and information, and sort of just our thoughts and feelings on it too. So it really does make for a fun segment.
Yeah, I think to end this off for me, the best way to kind of go about it is to not as much think about it as term like years of service time. I would think about it just career averages. As we know, baseball is a game where you're going to get hot, you're going to get cold. So it's tough to go off 1 year where a player could have the best year of all time. Where you look at, like, for example, Alek Manoah, where he got Cy Young votes, obviously, in 2022. Look at 2023, did not go his way whatsoever. Another thing that goes into his age as well. Like, if you look at a guy like Joey Votto, obviously a very good player throughout his career. You're going to say he's a bad player just because he got old? No, that's again. So there's a bunch of things that go into it, and there's not as much for me. It's 4 years, it's 5 years. Again, if I had to put a number on it, I guess it would be 3. But it's more so, hey, this guy over his 5-year career, his career averages, he's a 270 hitter and has an OPS of 800. That's probably more so what I'm going to lean into, rather than looking at like a last year stats saying like, oh, he hit 230, but his career averages is 270. He's probably not going to hit 230 his whole career, is kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. As always, guys, we hope that you tune in for tomorrow's Friday episode. We always appreciate you guys making us your first listen. If you want to find a second listen, go check out Locked On MLB. Host Paul Sullivan will break down all of the World Series action coming your way over the weekend and into next week. So hopefully you guys have a great time. We'll be back with we're going to do a little tee up for the World Series as well. Talk about some of the Blue Jays not some of the Blue Jays, a Blue Jay that's going to be in the World Series, or I guess 2 of them, right? 2 ex-Blue Jays. There we go.
There's a few Blue Jays in there.
Yeah. So we'll talk about them all tomorrow. Make sure you guys tune in for that, and have a good night.